Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we talk a lot about the home teams from our Pontchartrain production studios. We got a great guest list, as always, to be able to break it down for you. Jude Young and Rene, Nadeau, CrestCitySports.com will break down the Saints, LSU, Tulane, and Pelicans for us tonight. Gentlemen, welcome back to the show. As always, Happy New Year to both of you, since it's the first time on since 2019. And Jude, tell the folks about what you guys are involved in, especially first with you. How them Privateers doing? They're a little injured right now. Huh?
We're more than a little injured, but big win last night on the road. It's not a good team in Houston Baptist, but we only brought 9 players. That's how banged up we are. Only could play 8 and yet able to pull out a victory that we needed. So we'll see if that's something that can be built upon. Right now, just trying to make the conference tournament would be good. And of course, I'm the play-by-play voice on Nash Icon 106.1 FM, where I also have a talk show a couple nights a week in the 7 o'clock hour. And my main gig is CrescentCitySports.com, where we have award-winning writers and guys who are in the know, like this guy to my left, that help make it happen. And we're really proud about our ability to cover high school, college, and the pros, and add another New Orleans perspective for the sports scene locally.
Yep, do a great job as well. Welcome back, Rene. Always good to have you on the program. I know football is finished, but during the year, you're very, very busy all year round.
Well, like I always answer that, football is never over. It goes to the next phase. It's never over. We got signing day coming up soon. You got practice, spring practice in high school and college. You got OTAs coming up with the Saints. You got the draft coming up. If you know where to look, and you don't have to look very far, football never really goes away. So I'm a color analyst during football season. Also work in radio from TV. I also work for CBS Radio for Saints games and some bowl games, and which I did the other night for the championship, and Pelicans on once in a while, and also write for Crest City Sports. So I deal with Jude quite a bit. He knows I'm in his ear all the time, sending him stuff and keeping him up late at night. But it's all good.
Y'all both do a fantastic job. Thank you for being with us tonight. We start off with the LSU Tigers. They beat Clemson at 42-25 in the national championship game in the Louisiana Superdome on Monday. National champions, SEC champions, 15-0. Also a consensus number 1 team in the nation. And guys, I'd love to get your take from a historic perspective on where this team is. Defeated 7 top 10 teams. Number 9 Texas, number 7 Florida, number 9 Auburn, number 3 Alabama, number 4 Georgia, number 4 Oklahoma, number 3 Clemson. When you talk about the offense, they bested 6 top 25 defenses this past year. And of course, all the awards and accolades that we've seen, from Heisman's to, again, the Coach of the Year, to the best offensive line, to the Biletnikoff Award for the best receiver. Joe Burrow, again, they have to have a new wing in his house that he builds after he's the number 1 overall pick to put all the trophies he has. But is this the best team in the history of college football, the 150-year history of college football? And I'd like to piggyback on that. Is this the best LSU team ever?
Well, the latter is easy to answer. There's no question it's the best LSU team ever. And you're trying to figure out, when you have this debate topic, where you rank the Tigers. Well, it depends on how you word it. Is it the most talented team ever? I'm not going to say that, but that's still a work in progress, because we determine that in part how these guys do on the next level in the NFL. But I will say it's the most accomplished single-season team ever for all the points you just made. There's no question that they went through a gauntlet and they came out on the other end 15-0 and set records and played such a tough schedule and performed so well, and you had the best single season by any individual player in college football history, other than maybe Cam Newton. That's my list. It's Joe Burrow and Cam Newton 1-1. Because they were both so tremendous in their time. Of course, Newton with Auburn back in 2010. That's how good Burrow is, and I think he's the most NFL-ready quarterback that college football has ever produced. So his future is so bright, it's ridiculous. And obviously, if the Bengals keep the pick, that could really turn around a franchise that is, I'm not going to call it moribund, but underachieving at times, and maybe a little thrifty. Maybe things change because of what he brings to the table. But for this LSU team, the future's still bright because Ed Orgeron did build this thing. He deserves all the credit in the world, and it will be hard for him, though, to match what he did in this season, because I think it's going to go down in history and probably never be matched in LSU's.
Yeah. Rene, same question, but I'd also like you to take the media cap off for a second. You're a former LSU player. Again, you toiled at Tiger Stadium. You went to those practices. As a former player, what did this season mean to you?
You know, it was to the records, and Jude just alluded to that. Over 8,000 yards going into the Clemson game, 729 points, and I did a lot of radio shows and interviews about how good this team was compared. And I would go back as far as the Red Blake teams, Army, Nebraska, the Oklahomas, the Notre Dames, the Miami teams. And because of, I think what set this team apart is something you said. I mean, you got Delpit is the Thorpe Award winner. Joe Burrow, Heisman Trophy, the best offensive line, Biletnikoff winner. You got so many pieces here. This was, I mean, the best collection of talent. And how would they fare? It wouldn't be fair, Judge, to play against a Red Blake Army team way back when. But, you know, to do what they did, and they had a, target on the back. Everybody they played brought their best game. And LSU stepped up in most cases, except for Auburn maybe, didn't just win by a field goal, won by a lot.
Yes.
And it was lopsided scores they won by. And I got to think that also, just piggyback what Jude said, not only is this team good, but guys stepped up. You lost a lot of guys in the juniors, 7 juniors so far, and you're losing a lot of seniors like Burrow and Damian Lewis, the guards, and McGee, and guys you have to replace. But you look back a year ago, okay? Jamar Chase had 23 catches for over 300 yards and 7 touchdowns. And look what he did this year, 20 touchdowns. Last year, Justin Jefferson, the year before he had no catches. He had 54 last year. This year he has 111. You look at Jacob Phillips, had 18 tackles 2 years ago. Patrick Queen had 7. My whole point is guys step up. And you can have guys step up in this class, on this team, and who maybe a year or two ago you didn't think much of Patrick Queen or Jacob Phillips or maybe Justin Jefferson, but look what they did and look what they're capable of. And just like Jude said, Ed Orgeron has built this foundation for this team to have players such as that, the recruits that he's been having great recruiting classes that are ready to step up. And it's another story, another day maybe, but Miles Brennan, I don't think people realize, could he be another Heisman Trophy? I don't know that, but he can be a lot better than people think.
Right, we're going to dive a little bit deeper in that in a second. Talk about it from a personal standpoint. A guy that, again, has worn the purple and gold.
Oh, man, that was because it wasn't a close game.
Right.
They won. They took Clemson's best shot. And it was so gratifying and seeing those guys win the game and the way they did it. Kept their cool, experienced some penalties early on and overcame that, just, kept sawing wood, if you will, didn't get rattled. And I just think that this, on the biggest stage, they played a really outstanding game. And, you're almost thinking that they due for a letdown somewhere. And it never has come. And I have to credit Ed Orgeron, for having a locker room like that. But this was such a this was a better win than any championship they've had.
Had so many people tell me this week, and I felt the same thing as again the game had ended. Didn't want it to end. It was such a special year that, even with the championship, and you wanted to get the championship, you just didn't want it to end. You wish you could keep going. I know a lot of people in the audience feel the same way. Look, final stat for you on something Rene was kind of talking about when you talk about the offense. The LSU offense outscored their final 3 opponents in the biggest games of the season. Number 4, Georgia in the SEC championship game. Number 4, Oklahoma in the college football playoff semifinal game. And number 3, Clemson in the national championship game, a combined 141 to 63. That tells you a lot about, again, where this team is offensively and defensively as you went down the stretch here. Let's talk a little bit about the defections, because that's the big story right now. And let's talk players first, then we'll get into coaches. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Sadiq Charles, Lloyd Cushenberry, Jacob Phillips, Patrick Queen, Grant Delpit, Justin Jefferson, definitely going to the NFL. There's a possibility that we may see a couple more defect. Chasson, Moss, Deculus, and Carrie Vincent. We already know the seniors that are moving on. Joe Burrow, Rashard Lawrence, Christian Fulton, Michael Divinity, Adrian McGee, Damian Lewis, Blake Ferguson. There are some returnees, guys that could have gone pro but have decided to stay. Tyler Shelvin, Jacoby Stevens, Glenn Logan, and the word is that Neil Farrow and Ed Ingram are going to return as well. Talk about the defections here. Look, when you're good, when you have a 15-0 season, when you win the national championship, when you go through all this, you're going to have players that are going to move on, okay, rather than try to stay for another year and defend. And you're going to have your coaches also that are going to move on. Let's take the players first. How big of a loss is this, these juniors moving on to the NFL?
Well, it's a huge loss, but it's the price of being an elite program. When you're successful, individual players are in the spotlight, they have success, and they feel like they've maximized their ability to show what they can do, and they're ready to move on and make their money, which you should do in football, especially as dangerous a game as it is physically for you. But that's the good news. That's where LSU wants to be. And it's going to be a year where a lot of guys are going to have to step up that are first-year starters that may have limited or no experience. But Orgeron has recruited some talented players. These classes have been top 10, top 5 already. And we'll see even more of the benefit of this year in the next 2 recruiting classes. They'll have even more elite talent coming in, including guys who are going to be ready to play right away because they're going to be the cream of the crop. But as for just next year, sure, it's going to be difficult to replace all these guys, and you're going to have to learn a bit on the fly. That early season game next year with Texas this time coming to Tiger Stadium will be awfully difficult. At least you get them at home this go round. But Sam Ehlinger, a senior quarterback, that's a team that underachieved, won't have as many junior defections, so they're going to come in more experienced than you. So that's the type of test you'll have to deal with along with the early conference schedule. I think they're going to be fine. It's going to come down to quarterback, because think of the people who were not able to leave early, who would have otherwise, like Derek Stingley, who would be a first-round pick already after one college season. Of course, Chase, the Biletnikoff winner. Terrace Marshall's going to get another opportunity, even more so, to shine. So if quarterback works out, whether it's Miles Brennan or somebody else, we don't know yet, this team's going to continue to score points. They've got experience and talent coming back on the offensive line. They've got the skill position players. And we saw this year when this defense was banged up, when the best players weren't able to be on the field. If you have a good offense, you can cover that up. You got to outscore people in the modern game, and LSU has the personnel to at least do that while a lot of people come up with their growing pains. I think the defections as far as the coaching staff might be a bigger question, because that's going to lead to changes in how this team operates on a play-by-play basis, and that might be the most important factor as far as Ed Orgeron trying to figure out how to come back and be a contender again next year.
We'll do a deep dive on those coaches in a moment. Your thoughts on the player defections?
I was a little surprised with Sadiq Charles. He was suspended for 6 games, any way you want to slice it, and that's questions he's going to have to answer. And he lost that time. That was 6 games.
Yes.
I thought Patrick Queen or Jacob Phillips, one would go, not both. They both went. Thaddeus Moss, a guy who I thought would give consideration to, and I thought Caleb Vaughn would be gone already. And both those may come back.
Right.
Yeah, so that would surprise me a great deal of Caleb Vaughn, because he's a potential first-round draft choice. Thaddeus Moss could be a 3rd, 4th-round guy. I think that it's going to hurt them a lot, but again, guys stepping up, linebacker position, as I see Damone Clark, Michael Baskerville, and Dante Starks, a kid from Barrett. That's 3 guys that's going to jump right in and have a chance to play that middle linebacker spot. But when you lose these guys, you lose a lot of leadership, and you lose a lot of experience, and that's hard to replace. You're losing 4 offensive linemen. You mentioned a couple of the guys. I would be very, very surprised if Deculus came out. I don't think he's ready. And Kerry Vincent's another one. I'd be very surprised if they came out. Losing Cushenberry is going to be, he was playing very well, and Cushenberry is probably a 3rd-round guy. Maybe it could be a late 2nd if somebody likes him, but he's a guy that could play center and guard, very smart. He knows his limitations and what he can do. So Cushenberry is a guy who can go a lot higher than people think. And Justin Jefferson. Let me tell you, 2007, LSU had 4 number 1 draft choices. That's the only time LSU, if Caleb Chason comes out, LSU could have 5 number 1 draft choices. That's never happened.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm going to take you first on the coaching defections, and let's take Joe Brady, and then we'll kind of go in order on this. Becomes the passing coordinator of the Carolina Panthers. He piggybacks on, obviously, the explosive offense, the historic offense of LSU. He was a guy that was really an unknown assistant with the Saints. He comes over. He gets a tremendous amount of credit for bringing the Saints concepts over. But we discussed this before the show started. Ensminger called the plays. He's going there really as a guy that has done really nothing other than he got the offense from the Saints. He brought it over to the LSU Tigers. Obviously, they had to teach the concepts, but it'll be interesting to see again how he performs at Carolina, being the offensive coordinator. As I said on the radio show this week, there's no security blanket. There's no Coach E right there. He's the guy that's got to make all the calls. At the end of the day, the buck stops with him. In-game adjustments, all those things that, again, you'd get from experience at that position. I think it's a little bit of a roll of dice for Rule at this point to go for Joe Brady. I thought maybe, again, that he would have an opportunity to maybe be an offensive coordinator at maybe a college school before he'd go to pros. What are your thoughts?
And this is not a bash, Joe Brady. First of all, I'm glad for him.
Absolutely.
I'm glad for him because good for him that he got a chance.
Right.
Okay, but I agree. This was a mighty big risk. You took a guy 1 year, and with all respect to what Joe Brady did, everything went past Steve Ensminger. Joe Brady and Steve Ensminger both had the Heisman Trophy winner and the records that Joe Burrow put up. They had the best offensive line. They had the Biletnikoff winner. They had Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who had more touchdowns than any back in the SEC. They had so many weapons and so many toys to play with. I mean, I'm not saying anybody could have done it, but there was a lot of things. Now, how much did Joe Brady help with that? I'm sure he enhanced. There's no question about it. But it's a mighty big risk at this point to take him. George Munoz is probably going to move into that slot, most likely.
All right.
He was the third person, if you will, and George Munoz is a guy who had a lot to do with Joe Burrow's
He is
success.
a former offensive coordinator
ULL.
and a co-offensive coordinator.
Yes.
What is it, Eastern Illinois offensive coordinator, and as you mentioned, ULL.
Yeah, and so he's very astute. He's very smart. He knows what he's doing. He knows the product, and I don't say it won't skip a beat, but I think that it's a no-brainer or a natural for him to get that spot. And I wish Joe Brady the best. It's going to be a tough road. Tough sledding. Matt Rule is, he don't have much dealing with the NFL in the past.
Right.
And
he's a defensive coach.
He's a defensive coach.
That's the other part.
It's going to be tough.
It's not like he's an offensive guru. You throw Brady up there, and then if something goes wrong, eventually you say, okay, I'm calling the plays now. He's a guy that's a defensive coach. Go ahead.
No, I was going to just say this, and unless you were going to wait.
No.
I think a person to keep an eye on is going to get interviewed at the very least is Bill Bush.
Oh, for defense.
Yes.
We'll come back to that in a moment.
Okay.
That's going to be one of my questions. Why don't you take Brady and then go right into a random?
Well, one, Brady had to do it, and you're right about Rule because he's giving Brady total control
Yes.
on the offense and the hires.
Right.
So there is going to be no plan B that Rule will know coming in necessarily. It's whoever Brady wants, but he had to take that job. We'll see how it works out, but he is working for a coach that has a 7-year, $66 million contract.
Right.
So job security is there. He can have some growing pains. He's not going anywhere
job security
anytime soon.
is there for Rule.
Right, but I would think there's job security
Yes.
for him too, because there's an understanding that this is, as far as NFL jobs go, a rebuild, which means a year or two to figure it out. But as far as LSU goes, one of the two biggest things that Brady brought with him is still there, which is the playbook.
The playbook, right.
That's what it comes down
That's
to, because you hear the story about Joe Burrow going through the playbook, new play.
Right.
Guess who made that work on game day? Steve Ensminger.
Right.
Guess who's the quarterback's coach who's still there? Steve Ensminger. The other thing you do lose is you need to find somebody that can work with the receivers as well as Brady did.
On the reading of the concepts,
Right.
where you go, how you read the
Yes.
defense, what you need to do, right?
That's
good at that.
extremely important.
Absolutely.
So I think LSU completely understands that. Orgeron and Ensminger will make sure that that's a void that is filled. So the machine can keep on rolling, and you do have Chase and Marshall coming back as well who know. And when you have guys that are now in a system, there is as good a teachers to the young receivers coming in and working their way up as any coach can be, because those units work so hard together. So now LSU has something to build upon, and I think they're going to be just fine there. As an LSU fan, you really don't have to worry about it, because again, Ed Orgeron deserves all the credit in the world for being somebody who has learned from his mistakes and has figured out how to be a CEO, which we all expected he would be.
Yes.
Make those big decisions and put the right decision makers in place. Replace them when they move on to bigger and better things, because that means you're winning. You'll have an attractive position to fill because those guys are moving on to bigger and better things, and he will make the right decisions because he understands, get the best minds in there and let coaches coach.
Do you agree that Munoz is going to be elevated?
It seems like that's the direction they're going in, and that makes a lot of sense, because right now, especially with all you're losing, continuity is as important as ever. So let him prove that he can move into that role and just keep the machine rolling.
All right, Dave Aranda has taken the Baylor job. Your first reaction to that?
I'm a little worried for Dave Aranda, because I thought when I heard the news of UNLV, I thought that was a better spot for him, a non-Power 5 job, because the things you hear about Aranda, not a great recruiter. The things you see from Aranda, not the most dynamic personality.
Dynamic, right.
So you're moving into a job where you're following one of the two best coaches Baylor has ever had, and they're both in recent memory, and following in the footsteps of Rule in particular. Look, he'll have the same mindset, a defense-based first sort of mindset that allowed Baylor to have the best defense in that conference, which is so known for its high-scoring games, and allowed them to be different and to rebuild so quickly. It's maybe easier to maintain when the foundation's in place and you share the same philosophies, but I worry for him, and I think this might be a good time for LSU to have a bit of a change. When you're paying the best salary in the country for that particular job, everybody's going to be interested in it.
Right.
LSU won't have any problem replacing Dave Aranda, and people who follow me and my show and me on social media know that I had my questions about Aranda. He was extremely surprised that his way of running a defense wasn't going to work very early in the season. There was shock, and it's been reported by different reporters that talked to him behind the scenes that he was stunned after the Texas game how overwhelmed they were. He's a guy who really relies on those Jimmy and Joes a little bit more than I think we realize, and isn't somebody like a Brent Venables who can come up with a different kind of game plan on the fly to at least give a defense a different look and problems. It worked for about 20 minutes of 60 in the national title game. So I think this is a good time for him to move on. I don't know if he's moving on to a job he can handle, but again, LSU should be okay there because the talent's going to be there. They'll be able to recruit to whatever the new defensive coordinator needs, and again, you're going to be paying top dollar, so you're going to get a good coach.
Yeah. Why don't you talk a little bit about his defection?
I knew it was coming. I mean, I can't say I knew it now. I knew sooner or later. I mean, how many interviews you have to have before you finally go?
Right.
And I think strike with the iron's hot. I think he's, being a national champion all right. And this might be a good time. I think he's been wanting to leave. Not that he doesn't like LSU at Baton Rouge. I think he's just a guy that's looking for a head coach or maybe a great opportunity or the next opportunity. And I think his family liked it here a lot. And I just think that, he turned down some other opportunities or didn't work out. But he was looking for something, and Baylor, in his mind, I'm sure he talked to people and felt like, this is a good situation for me. The thing about what's going to happen, Eric Asher's a defensive coordinator at XYZ University. Eric, we just paid the last guy $2.5 million a year, and look at the toys you have. You're right. A lot of people are going to knock on the door and want to talk to Ed Orgeron. But I still say that as a recruiter and as a coach, Bill Bush has been a defensive coordinator at 3 different schools.
Okay.
He was at Rutgers, he was at Utah State, and Northern Arizona. So you can say, well, that's not LSU. He was a defensive coordinator at 3 different places, and he knows the personnel here. And he is a great recruiter. He got Joe Burrow here.
He's the guy who brought Joe Burrow.
He brought Joe Burrow here. And I can see if Bill Bush comes in, if that happens, and I think that Ed Orgeron is going to look at names, and LSU is going to look at named people. But if Bill Bush is a good fit, and they think continuity, like Jude just said, he's the guy. Okay, let him do it. And a person I think would capitalize on this situation if a Bill Bush came in. Jacoby Stevens' role, he is going to be a key to that defense next year in a lot of different roles, and Bill Bush would enhance that. Jacoby Stevens next year.
I find it interesting. You figured you were going to lose Aranda at some point, okay? I thought Hawaii might have been the place, being that he was there for 4 years, family's familiar with it, etc. There's not a lot of pressure on him at that program. You mentioned UNLV, same type of situation. I'm a little surprised with Baylor. I agree with you. Not dynamic. not a great recruiter. How does that work? As the head coach, you're the guy now. You got to be front and center. You can't be that dry professor going forward. You got to kind of get guys going. I worry more, if I'm an LSU fan, about the assistants that were under these core, that were under maybe with Joe Brady or with Dave Aranda, that you may lose those guys. And maybe those guys might not be the X and O guys, but those are the guys that go out and recruit for you. And that's my concern, or would be my concern if I'm an LSU fan.
Well, that's the challenge of being a head coach and dealing with the dynamics of a staff. On the college level, you have to have a balance between guys' strengths and weaknesses. Not necessarily weaknesses, but you have to have enough guys who can help you get the Jimmies and Joes and get that recruiting and keep it stable, and guys who are really good at the X's and O's and coaching individual players. It's really hard to figure that out because when you have guys in-house and you can promote them, like we're talking about here, may be the path that they go. That's good because you already know what you're working with and what you're going to have to replace when you elevate them. But when you bring guys from outside of the program, the bright side of being an LSU is that you're going to be able to grab people who have resumes that tell you where they've been and what successes they've had. There's no secrets behind the scenes in the coaching game. You'll know if a guy is a good recruiter, where he's a good recruiter when you talk about regionally and nationally. So again, that's something else you don't worry about, except for the fact that there may be, like you said, because some of those coaches on the defensive side may go with Aranda, and there may be some runoff, obviously, with Brady going to Carolina. That's a lot potentially to replace in one offseason.
Especially if you think you're in line for, let's say a Corey Raymond believes he's got a shot and it goes to a Bill Bush. At that point you're going, wait a minute, I thought I was going to, and he's a great recruiter.
He's a great recruiter.
We'll see how that goes. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue a little bit more LSU, then we're going to get into the Saints, we'll get into some Tulane, we'll talk some Zion Williamson as well. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Our guests tonight, Jude Young and Rene Nadeau, CrestCitySports.com.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Tonight, Rene Nadeau and Jude Young of CrestCitySports.com. We'll continue our conversation about LSU for a little bit longer, and then we'll move on to the Saints and then on to Tulane, and then I'll touch on the return of Zion Williamson. In the break, we were talking a little bit about possible assistants that may bolt, and you brought up one I brought up on my radio show today, and that's James Craig, the offensive line coach. And I can remember us sitting here maybe a year or so ago when Alabama was running roughshod over that offensive line, and I asked you about, can a coach up a 2 and 3 and 4 star player so they can compete with the 5 stars? And you thought if they have the right coaching and the training team, and they absolutely can. That was proven this season.
Yes, and he did.
Yes,
he did. And I mean, he had some good players and stuff, but I'm gonna tell you, he's got the most out of those players. And you know, Damian Lewis came in as a highly regarded junior college guy, but he's done that with a lot of people, and he's made them all better. And I tell you what, he's done a great job with a guy who's got a shot at being a starting left tackle, Dare Rosenthal. So James Craig, the players love him. They play for him. I mean, he got the offensive line, the Joe Moore Award. He's a big part of that, and he's a great recruiter. But he's got great experience, and how long can LSU hold on to him? You know, another guy is Meatball Johnson, Dennis Johnson, his defensive line coach, great recruiter. And I know it won't be long before maybe he feels like he's got an opportunity somewhere else. You know, Corey Raymond, the defensive secondary coach. It's just guys that they hear, But if someone goes, I mean, it opens a door for someone else. But you cannot keep your staff intact forever.
No.
There's going to be changes.
Especially when you win like they do.
Yes, and a lot of LSU fans now, they hyperventilating,
Right.
worried I just won a national championship and our team is falling
Right.
apart. The world's not falling. It's just going to change a little bit. Sometimes change is good.
And we've seen Alabama in the last 3 or 4 years turn over basically their entire coaching staff.
But that's the Saban way, right?
That is the Saban way in part, but it's also what happens when
Yes.
coaches are looking to move up the ladder.
Yes.
If you go to a power program, they win games, you're going to get opportunities. But you can't say enough about Craig and his ability to come in to a situation and take advantage of a change in scheme to make it the unit, the offensive line, better than the sum of the parts. I didn't think there was a lot of elite talent there. We went into the season wondering, will this tackle play hold up? Deculus in particular at right tackle was a real concern. What happens if there's injuries, or what happened, which really surprised everybody, the under the table suspension where Sadiq Charles missed those 6 games. And that offense didn't miss a beat in those games, although they saved them. They were able to strategically move the chess pieces around and against lesser competition. But that really helps a coach who handled that situation show that, hey, they put in a pro offense that we ran at a higher level than you've ever seen on the college level. And the offensive line had to get the job done, and I made that happen. So his star is only rising.
Right. Guys, quickly, I'd like to just get your take, because I get the question all the time now, especially within the last 24 hours, based on what we've seen in terms of defections from coaches now and players. Rene, I'll take you first. How good can this LSU team be next year?
If we had this conversation last year, what you did at this time, I would have never said 15-0.
No, nobody would.
And, can they be 15-0? My initial reaction would be possibly not. But again, you don't know what's coming up. And a lot has to do with who you play and things like that. And Jude alluded to Texas is coming in, Alabama's coming here, got to go to Florida, got to go on the road in Auburn next year. It's going to be tough. But this schedule, looking at the rated teams, how highly rated they were, and LSU still beat them, and they beat them with talent, and they beat them with scheme. So I wouldn't sell LSU short on anything. Can they get into the playoffs again next year? I wouldn't sell them short on anything, because I think LSU will have enough talent to compete if they stay free from injuries, and the guys that we're talking about, some of these players who are now going to get chances to step up and be counted since the defections with the juniors, if they mature through the season as it goes, anything's possible.
Same question.
Rene nailed it. There's no doubt that 15-0 is almost certainly out of the question. You're not going to match this team, but can you have a successful season and stay in the hunt and make that Alabama game mean something battling for the SEC West? Sure, you're probably going to have to grit it out and win tougher, closer games in places like the Swamp and dealing with Auburn. And we know the SEC West in general looks like it's gotten a whole lot better. The 2 Mississippi schools making great hires. So there's going to be a lot of potential pratfalls there that they're going to have to deal with. But I think that they're going to be a competitive, good football team that's going to battle to be a top 10 type club if they get the quarterback play. Since we can't see the future, and again, 12 months ago, did we think Joe Burrow was going to be this?
Not this.
No, so it's hard to say, but I think Orgeron is not surprised by any of these situations he's having to deal with, these changes both in personnel and on the coaching staff, and they'll be ready to compete in those games next year because it's become a well-oiled machine at this point, and they've got enough talent to compete.
Final question on LSU, Coach Orgeron. Talk about him and what he, this year, the redemption, everything else that's going on here.
I've talked to players, and I know players well that played for him and seeing the way they are now. I know guys that played for Les Miles and played for Ed Orgeron. And what he did things that meant so much to the players. He did things, like example, Les Miles used to have it was his style, a 1 hour walkthrough in full pads before practice started. Ed Orgeron did away with that. He knew the players didn't like it. Now, he wasn't taking it easy on the players, but the players appreciated that he changed that.
Yes.
But he stepped back, and he was smart enough to know that I'm gonna let my assistants coach. The mistakes I made in the past, I'm not gonna duplicate that. And he hired the right people, and he stepped aside, and he was a great motivator. Ed Orgeron deserves a lot of credit. Everything he gets, he deserves, because he has stood back and said in a job that he wanted so desperately. It had been very easy for him to say, I got my job, I'm going to do it my way. But he stepped back and took a smaller role in some cases for the good of the team.
He's Cajun Pete Carroll, and that time at USC
like that.
means everything for
Right.
his career. He fails at Ole Miss, where he overworked the players. That was universally known, where he was too worried about going 100 miles an hour all the time than understanding that it's a marathon and you have to be the guy above everything and make sure the program's running right, that the players are responding, that the coaches are doing what they're supposed to do, and everybody's in sync. He was able to learn a little bit under Sean Payton with his time with the Saints. I think he's somebody who took his lessons from great leaders in football who had success, and when the time came, he was ready for it. I know USC and the folks out west are regretting not giving him that job when he was the interim there, because he could have had that same sort of success, even though he's a Louisiana guy and he doesn't talk like you're supposed to talk. He's a perfect fit here, but I think he'd be a perfect fit at any of these programs because he knows what to do now, and it's rare you get that sort of second chance, but he's a story that you root for because he's real, because the players know he's genuine, and that's really hard to do when you talk about being the head coach of a major college football program, but those players believe in him and they trust him, and that's not going to change because he knows what he's doing, and he knows that the value of taking care of the players and treating them the right way is the foundation to having success and getting more good players and winning football games.
All right, a little bit of a downer, and really I hate to even bring it up, but again, it's the story of the day, and that's Odell Beckham and what happened after the LSU game. And, you know, I've talked about it over the last day or so. You know, look, I love Odell Beckham. I loved him at Newman, at LSU. Again, I was hoping the Saints could get him in the draft. It was just too expensive to try to move up to get an Odell Beckham. I've been pulling for Odell Beckham since he hit the NFL, okay? I don't like the fact that he's gone from hungry to diva to moron in such a small amount of time.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Okay, because it's not the same kid we saw at Newman.
No.
It's not the same kid we saw at LSU. And the switch went off when he went to New York and, you know, whatever it is. But, you know, from handing out, whether it's real cash or phony money in the locker room on the sidelines, knowing you're going to get scrutiny from the NCAA, that's just not smart. That's putting your program at risk. Then the slapping of the rear end of the Superdome cop. And if you look at the video, he flicks something at him first when the cop is trying to get Damian Lewis to quit smoking the cigar. I mean, that's a question for another time on whether they should have been in there doing that or not, whatever. Okay, and now he's got a warrant out for simple battery. And then interrupting Coach O's victory speech. Here's a guy, everything Coach O has gone through in his career, the culmination of that, talking to his players, trying to, again, you know, exalt all of his emotion to them. And here's Odell Beckham chiming in like, you know, he's at church on Sunday and he's got to get his 2 cents in. All about Odell, all about, again, the spotlight on him when this was about the team and about LSU. Really frustrating for somebody that I really admire as a football player. And again, he's one of us. He's a hometown guy.
It was supposed to be about the team and about LSU, not about Odell Beckham Jr., but the problem with him is that he's gone over the edge. And what is it about being a superstar NFL receiver, whether you're Chad Johnson, Terrell Owens, Antonio Brown, now...
Oh, Michael Thomas this weekend, right?
Well, yeah, you can bring that up too, but he's not on their level yet,
No, he's
so
not.
let's not throw him in just yet. But it
you
makes you
can't-
wonder.
You can't challenge a
You're
reporter
right,
to
no
a
doubt.
fight because you don't like what he said on Twitter.
No doubt, and that's the problem with social media. But you can even give a slight pass because
Yes.
it's social media and fast Twitter fingers, as the reporter in question brought up in that exchange. But with Beckham, you're there stealing all the spotlight from the program and getting the program that you're supposed to care about and appreciate for what it did for you in trouble, because he's that much full of himself at the least now. And you have to wonder about whether he was under the influence of something, because you look at the way he behaved, you look at his eyes, look at how he handled himself, and you worry about him for his future if you care at all about Odell Beckham Jr., because there's clearly something wrong there, just like we saw in the news today. And speaking of Antonio Brown, his longtime agent Drew Rosenhaus said, I can't represent you anymore if you don't get help.
And if Drew Rosenhaus walks away from you, you know there's something wrong.
Right, so there you go with Beckham Jr. It seems like he's on that path. In the end, LSU's going to be fine. They'll handle the thing the right way. They won't have any penalties.
They've already self-reported, so that...
Right, exactly. So what's going to happen is they're going to cut ties completely, and he's not going to be able to have any contact with his old college program
And that's
anymore.
terrible, considering he's one of the greatest football players LSU has ever produced. And right now, he's one of the faces of the NFL for better or for worse.
Right. He's supposed to be a role model,
Right.
right? He's
Well-
not a role model. He's the exact opposite of that, which you don't want your players emulating.
Rene?
If you want to be a wet blanket, he checked all the boxes on the biggest day of maybe one of the biggest days in LSU history.
Right.
I mean, he did everything you could possibly do wrong. I mean, he checked all the boxes.
Right.
But I'm going to tell you, I don't think you ought to ban him, but having Scott Woodard there now is, I think he is going to be a guy who knows how to handle this situation, and he'll do it the right way. It may be a probationary kind of situation, and he may say, this is the way it is. If you love LSU as much as we think you do and everything else, this is what you're going to have to do and stuff like that. But I think the athletic director is a perfect person to handle this. I don't know where who would envision that he'd do the things he did? I mean, come in, if you just said, there's Odell Beckham to come down the field and give money out and slap a cop, there's no way. Who told you that?
That behavior is ridiculous, though. He would be very lucky if an LSU alum like Woodward was nice enough to give him a probationary period, because what if he does something else that embarrasses and affects the program? I don't think I would take that risk, because not only of his behavior on Monday night, but what he has done over the past years now to run himself out of New York, to make himself look like a clown. He looks like a clown publicly. He looks like somebody who's losing control of his life more than his career. Do you want that around your program?
It's terrible because of what he's meant to this program, and it was so good to see the former players there basking in the glow of this. That's one thing Ed Ogeron has done. He has opened up that facility to anybody that's worn the purple and gold. Doesn't matter, and of course, a lot of guys have taken advantage of it. It's unfortunate what has happened. All right, let's shift to the Saints. I'm going to this guy first. I'll just open it up. We know what happened with the Vikings. We saw what happened last week when San Francisco ran the football. And again, I'll stand by it. They run Latavius Murray. They're going to win against Minnesota. They're going to beat Green Bay, and they're in the NFC Championship this weekend. You were hot on Twitter about the Saints, but also about the NFL.
Well, I've been furious about the NFL because I feel that there is an axe to grind from the league dating back to scandals, not just Bountygate, many years with Saints leadership, including Sean Payton. And I think the Saints are paying that price when it comes to the officiating, and it's now happened over multiple seasons. So I seriously question the integrity of the leadership in the National Football League, and it's not just because I'm local, but because I'm seeing it with my own eyes. So questionable, not just affecting the Saints, but how poor the officiating is at best. It makes you wonder, how can it be so incompetent? How can they fail to enforce their rules? And just how much are they intentionally bending those rules to get results that they want? You start asking those questions when you see the officiating be so bad on that level on a consistent basis. So I'm going to keep beating that drum, because I don't want to see the love of this franchise die because people start believing locally that it's pointless because they're not going to let us win, because there are people that feel like that now. You have that vibe. You heard it from your callers going into the playoffs. We're not going to make this postseason run anyway because the NFL won't let us, and then look what happens again at the very end of the game.
When you look at what happened, the way Major League Baseball handled the Houston Astros situation, where it doesn't matter, again, what tentacle you were at, what team you were at, if you were involved in this sign stealing scandal, you have been banned from the league, you've been fired from your clubs. I will tell you, in my opinion, they wanted Mickey Loomis fired. They wanted Sean Payton fired. There was no way Tom Benson was firing his Super Bowl coach or his confidant in the front office in Mickey Loomis. And the suspensions, the taking away from of the draft choices. No, I could see the conspiracy theorists out there talking about the fact that the Saints will never get a call from New York. I've said it on my radio show. I don't believe they'll ever get a call when this thing ever goes to New York. But it's the inconsistency around the league when it comes to officiating that's hurting this game. Look, the advent of sports gambling in this country being legalized and not having, again, excellent officiating is going to hurt the NFL down the stretch here.
Well, it makes you wonder what conversations were going on between ownership, Dennis Lauscha, and Roger Goodell way back when, because I can tell you what happened with this MLB situation. Jim Crane, the owner of the Houston Astros, was told in no uncertain terms, look, not only are we going to suspend these guys for a year, but we strongly suggest that you get rid of both of them right now. Cut ties, or you might regret it. Okay, we're making an example of you because, trust me, this Stein stealing story is far more widespread, including the biggest market in the country, and eventually all that's going to trickle out. Right. But you won a World Series doing it blatantly, and those two were in charge, and we had issues with the GM to begin with, a lot like I think there were issues with Loomis and Payton and how they thumbed their nose at times and other issues behind the scenes. So you better get rid of them. And this is Jim Crane with his group of investors protecting their investment. Tom Benson decided not to do that, and we're still seeing the repercussions of it today.
I'm telling you, I'm not discounting that. Rene, your thoughts?
Well, I'll say this, and then I'll get into the game itself. But I agree that even with the replays now, the Saints, it seems like I cannot believe, and I've seen it around the league too.
It's just not here. It's everywhere.
Not just here. It's horrendous calls that are being reviewed, and you think, how could, I cannot believe they're missing these calls, but it continues to happen. It wouldn't make a difference if these guys went full time because again, the calls are being reviewed, and they're not being overturned. As far as the Saints and the Vikings. The Saints got outplayed.
Yes, they did.
They got outplayed.
Out-physical.
Out-coached.
They weren't ready to play.
They were not ready to play, and I think their mind was going to Green Bay.
Well, that was the biggest story, I think, from that football game. I thought that Sean Payton, probably for the importance of the game, was the worst coaching job of his career. Just in-game situations, clock management, going all the way back to the fact that it looked like, as you said, that they were looking ahead to the next game and thought they had it in the bag, which is the last thing you can do in the NFL.
Especially after Atlanta coming off the bye week, right?
Exactly. And this is a better football team that basically had a bye of its own in Week 17.
And a franchise that has owned the Saints in postseason.
Right.
Let's be honest about it.
You're trying to find any motivation you can to get them ready as opposed to allowing that mindset to kick in. And there's no doubt that Sean Payton is culpable as anybody for that loss to Atlanta as well that you bring up coming off a bye. That team was distracted for different reasons, and that should not have happened. So you start to wonder about Payton and his focus on making sure that this team can maximize his potential with a window potentially closing. We've never had to question that before. Now we do.
Let's talk a little bit about possible free agency. First of all, if we can just run quickly through this, does Breeze return?
I think he's going to return, but anything is possible. I just don't know what Sean Payton thinks of Taysom Hill, because I think Teddy Bridgewater is gone and he's going to get an opportunity someplace else. So it comes down to, do I want to give Taysom Hill a chance to compete with maybe another retread, try to find my Ryan Tannehill, maybe from the guy whose job was lost to Tannehill and Marcus Mariota, for example. Does he want to go that route or not? Because again, you are still built to compete for a Super Bowl. It's an awful risk, and I think in the end, because Taysom Hill's restricted, he'll bring Breeze back, but because it's Drew Brees, unless he gets hurt, you're not going to be able to play Hill, so you're kicking the can down the road, but I think that's what they're going to do.
Think he's coming back?
Yeah, he's coming back for another 2 years, I think. He'll be
2 years?
Yes.
You think it's 2 years? Okay.
I think 2 more years.
Okay, 2 years. Again, remember, $21 million in dead money right there. They got to be able to absorb that somehow.
I think he's, and they're going to have to work that out, but I think he is physically capable of playing next year, and I think unless injuries occur, I think he'll probably be physically capable the following year. I believe Teddy Bridgewater is going to be gone. He'll get an opportunity somewhere else.
First round tender for Taysom Hill. He's a restricted free agent now. And I mean, if you give him less than a first round tender, you're taking a chance on losing it.
Right. And he's a guy that you can ill afford to lose. I mean, you put him up with the Michael Thomas and the Drew Brees and DeMario Davis. He's a valuable member of this, but he will never be the starting quarterback with the Saints.
I agree with you.
I don't think he will either, but yes, he's that valuable for a first-round tender because you just need to continue to expand his role. Find out what he can't do because it seems like he can do everything.
Kamara, do they renegotiate his deal this year based on a tough year, or do they allow him to go through the season? And then, of course, I believe is he a restricted free agent at the end of next season?
They'll let him go through.
They'll let him go through?
They'll let him go through.
They should let him go through.
Right, they should let him go through. A lot of people think they should trade Kamara.
Look, maybe if the right opportunity comes up, especially as aggressive as they are on draft day, I just didn't see the same player, and he was a guy whose college career was derailed at Alabama because of injuries. As soon as injuries hit this year, he was a different player, and that's something that could continue on until he gets that next contract because he's thinking about being paid. As a professional athlete, he should be, but that's an issue if you're trying to win.
Talk legacy for me for a moment. 1 Super Bowl, 3 NFC championships. When you talk about the 3 NFC championships, 1 and 2 in those championships, when you look at the teams that ultimately were Super Bowl caliber teams, 11, 13, 18, 19, what's the legacy here?
So far, I mean, one of the best franchises in the league for that long a period of time. Look, Super Bowls aren't guaranteed, even getting to them. It's just so difficult in these one-off situations when the best teams in the league in a given year.
But you do have a first-ballot Hall of Famer quarterback.
You do, but you didn't always have the best talent. And again, he's not the coach and GM, so Peyton's legacy, we're just talking about Peyton or just this era?
The Saints,
the Saints in general, it's been a successful era, but sure, the last couple of years feel like lost opportunity that has put a bit of a smudge on the shine that was there as far as the success of the past 14 years.
I mean, give Sean. The Falcons stubbed their toe was not good, but the Saints went 13-3 this year.
Right. Oh no.
13-3.
Well, that's the frustrating part about this.
And just it just other teams played well.
And 5-0 without the Hall of Fame
they were
quarterback.
10-6 in that first. Right. So I'm saying is that this year it just so happened 13-3 just wasn't good enough.
Well, and also again, and look, I think J.J. Redick touched on it in an interview he did recently, where again, I think part of the problem is today's athletes. I think at one time you could put the cone of silence on an athlete. You can keep away from the newspaper. You can keep away from TV news. You can keep away from talk radio. I think now with the cell phones, with social media, they are being told how great they are constantly. And I think that this team, although it has some veterans on it, there's a lot of young players on this team, and I think they bought into. They ate the cheese that Sean Payton stopped his 2009 team from eating. And I think that's the big problem right there with that. Guys, I want to move on quickly because I want to get to the phone calls. I want to ask first, before we go to Pelicans, what the heck is going on at Tulane? Jet Duffy, again, the graduate transfer, dual threat quarterback from Texas Tech, graduates from Texas Tech, but again, wants to come to Tulane, wants to play at Tulane. Did not qualify academically for Tulane's master's program. He's not going to be allowed in school. They had an academic advisor that went in and checked everything out. They had coaches that checked everything out, or if they didn't, they should have. For Willie Fritz, I mentioned this a few weeks ago on this program. To me, they used to have the University College before Katrina, and a lot of athletes went through University College. They don't have that anymore. And I got to wonder why Willie Fritz would not insist on some way to be able to get some athletes into Tulane, okay? This is a guy that graduated from an accredited university, and he's not going to be playing at Tulane next year.
You explained a little bit more in detail about that situation because I've been traveling and I hadn't paid as much attention to it as I wanted to. But my thoughts on that may be that maybe the hoops that needed to be jumped through were as far as the academic side of things. But this is a quarterback who had a background issue that took him off the field, a domestic issue off the field. So maybe in the end, the powers that be on campus above the athletic department decided they didn't want to take a risk on the guy. I'm just spitballing here. I don't know.
Well, they've had a lot of problems at Tulane. They've had some problems at Tulane with sexual assault, stuff like that. I know they're very, very sensitive to that. I know the coaching staff thought this kid was coming in.
Right,
but they had it.
And it is the quarterback that is the featured player on your football team. Again, I don't know what exactly happened, and maybe we'll get leaks and information later on, but I think it might be more that than this ongoing academic issue that has, as you mentioned, without the university college, it's hurt the baseball program, I think, from reaching its potential as well, and obviously it's going to hurt football.
No doubt.
I can't add much to it except the fact that I do think a personal situation played a role in this. And you're right. How can you not be on the same page when you got your potential starting quarterback coming here? He has all the qualifications and the skills that you want in your quarterback.
Right.
He's at the altar and he gets stood up at the altar.
Right,
so.
exactly. And from what I understand from the inside, Willie Fritz is not too happy about this as well. And why would you be? Why would you put the energy into recruiting this kid, thinking you got him, and then he can't get in school? And he's graduated from Texas Tech. Let's grab a couple calls. Toby is in Metairie. Toby, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Toby.
Hey, if Christian Fulton's there when the Saints pick, should they take him? And I thank you.
Thank you. Guys, Christian Fulton.
He's going to be a first-round pick. I don't think he's somebody I think the Saints would certainly keep in the bullpen. I got to guess and say a wide receiver, a linebacker is somebody that the Saints are going to look real hard at. A cornerback is somebody too. It depends on how they have them rated. I have no way of knowing that. But I guess if you want to say yes or no, I would say yes. It was somebody that the Saints would look hard at.
Right, he's in that range maybe. He could be higher in the first round. I've seen him graded even higher. He might have taken a ding. I think he did with his performance against T. Higgins, another first-round pick for Clemson in the national championship game. You wonder about his ability to hold up one-on-one. But he was admirable, starting next to a true freshman, although a very special one in Stingley, playing hurt for a chunk of the season as well. He's got elite ball and cover skills. Maybe his best days are ahead of him. And if the Saints feel like Marshawn Lattimore coming up, dealing with him with an extension. One more year, we assume, having picked up Janoris Jenkins, and really no depth outside of that because you have a problem there to cover corners. Yeah, but do you do it in the first round when, like you said, they really need help at receiver for one. They may see multiple defections on the offensive line, just a couple on that side of the ball they may need to address first.
Right. And Justin Jefferson seems more like a guy that might be available at 24 that might fit for this team. Again, that would be a guy that I would look at. Wallace is in New Orleans. Hey, Wallace.
Hey, how y'all doing
Doing
today?
great, Wallace.
Okay.
All right, this is what they need to do. Get rid of Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara, and try to get that first pick, move up
Right.
in the draft and get Joe Burrow. That way you have a lot of money to fix your offense up and your defense.
Okay.
And get rid of some of them older players, too.
All right,
I'll sit back and see what y'all got
Let me let
to
the
say.
panel talk about that because that was something Rene brought up before we even came on the show today. Go ahead, Rene.
Let me ask you something. Would you make that pick? I wouldn't. I mean, I don't know if, Wallace, if you got a suitor who's going to make that trade,
Right.
but who is going to give up the number one pick to take Drew Brees, who might have maybe 2 years,
Right.
or maybe 1 year, and Alvin Kamara, who his future is uncertain. So I'm sorry, I don't think anybody would make that trade.
But what would it take to get to that number one pick?
It would take probably 2 number ones and 2 number twos. If a Saints or Patriots would make the pick, it would probably take at least 2 number ones and 2 number twos. So you're mortgaging your future to make that move. But if Joe Burrow is the guy, you make that move.
Would you make that move?
Yeah, I would.
I've said it. We had
Oh,
the
I know.
conversation.
I'm throwing it to you.
I think Joe Burrow, outside of injury, which is always a potential issue, okay, other than that, he is ready to roll. He's going to be a franchise NFL quarterback who's going to be able to win you big games if he's in the right situation. He's that good and he's that special. But we're talking about the New Orleans Saints here, who pick late in the first round, who still have a window to win the Super Bowl right now. You're giving up on that window if you're making that trade. Plain and simple, because you're also going to have to give players outside of picks because of where you pick in the first round. So if you get the Bengals to be enticed by what you have to offer, you're talking about putting maybe Michael Thomas on the table and eating dead money thinking, okay, we're not going to win for the next couple of years, but we're going to build around Burrow. The Saints aren't ready to do that. I know Sean Payton must love Joe Burrow, just like we heard rumors.
Right.
He liked Lamar Jackson. He liked Pat Mahomes. Guess what? He's not ready to kick the future down the road when he feels like he can still win a Super Bowl right now. As much as we'd love to see Burrow in black and gold, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, but he wouldn't add Michael Williams. He wouldn't add
Michael Thomas?
Well, that's
Michael
the
Thomas.
point. It's
Yeah.
not going to happen,
Michael
but
Thomas,
it's
I'm
what it
sorry,
would
yeah.
cost.
But I think it would take additional players as well.
Teron
right?
Armstead,
Right.
somebody like that.
It may
Marcus Davenport, who cost you 2 first-round
Yes.
picks. Those are the type of young, talented players a team like the Bengals would want.
Right. Now, and again, for the Bengals, let's face it, this is box office for them
Yeah.
as well.
Oh, yeah.
Hometown
Oh,
kid,
yeah.
used to be at Ohio State, Heisman Trophy winner. For them, it sells tickets. Joe Burrow sells tickets for the Cincinnati Bengals.
Right, and that's all they're really concerned
Yes.
about there.
You
Mike
know?
Brown is one of the
Right.
more questionable owners when it comes to where his
Right.
priorities are.
If I'm a Saints fan, I'm waiting and saying, okay, in 5 years, I could go get Joe Burrow. Because one thing we know about the Cincinnati Bengals, they don't spend money.
Right. And even if they want to, if
Right.
things aren't going the right way,
Right.
Joe Burrow and his father's a smart man
Right.
advising him. He's not going to sign a long-term contract because he knows eventually he could force his way out.
That's so I would say at this point I'd look around the second time around for Joe Burrow, no doubt about it. Guys, as always, really appreciate you guys being part of the program.
Always funny.
I always look forward to it. Again, one more time, tell the folks about the radio show and how folks can keep up with everything that's going on at Crescent Sports.
Nash Icon 106.1 FM, 7 o'clock weeknights, and I'm the voice of the UNO Privateers. You can catch us. We play pretty much every Wednesday and Saturday in conference play on Nash Icon as well. Follow me on Twitter at Jude Young. Follow Crescent City Sports on Twitter at CCS Daily.
And you'll catch all of Renee's writings over at CrescentCitySports.com as well. Thanks, gentlemen. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
being
Eric.
with us.
Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE-TV at 10 p.m. Also, Pelican Sports Television. That's statewide. That is 9 o'clock every Friday. We have a YouTube channel here at WLAE-TV. The show is on the YouTube channel. Also, I post that on my social media pages. And, of course, you can always go to ericasher.com and see all the previous shows that we've had. Don't forget, catch me on the radio. That's Sports 1280, 101.1 FM HD2 in the iHeart Radio app. That is noon to 2 weekdays. You can listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com as well. I want to thank our guests tonight, Jude Young and also Rene Nadeau of CrescentCitySports.com. Also want to thank our great friends here at WLAE. Also our underwriters, who, again, we very much appreciate underwriting the show. The production staff here at WLAE, Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Naila Jones, Alex Chacon, and my director, William Hill. I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.